interesting talk tonight. We're going to talk about the law and how it relates with vaccines. And there's a whole lot to know about this. There's a lot of legal loopholes, things that you need to know to protect yourself and protect your family. And probably a lot of things that you don't know that's going on behind the scenes. So when we talk about the law, sometimes people, their eyes glaze over and they don't think it applies to them and they're bored. But it's actually quite fascinating. And it actually impacts your everyday life whether you realize it or not. So it impacts your food labeling, food manufacturing, vaccines, GMOs. I mean, the list goes on and on and on about how the law impacts your life. And that's why I think it's really critical that we know what's going on and that we're informed so that we can spread the word, let people know, we can get involved and hopefully change things for the better. So there's two types of law, and there's natural law. And natural law is basically God-given. And this is just, you look at the natural order of things. That's what natural law is. And then there's positive law. And positive law is things like all the statutes. It's things that we have made up, our legislature has made up, deemed it's important. And there's a lot of laws out there that are really good for our protection. But there's a lot of laws that impinge our freedoms. And that's kind of what we're going to get into tonight, because what's happening with vaccines is impinging our freedoms. And it's important to know. Now, looking at immunizations, a lot of people think immunizations are the same thing as vaccinations. They're completely different things. They're night and day. But that's not the way the word is used nowadays, in the media. It's not used that way. So the World Health Organization, which we are, member of the World Health Organization, has a definition, and it says immunization is a process whereby a person is made immune or resistant to an infectious disease, typically by administration of a vaccine. So typically. So that means that immunization is way more than vaccination. In vaccination, they say it stimulates the body's own immune system to protect the person against subsequent infection or disease. So, as you can tell, just by looking at the definition, they're not the same thing. And it's really, really important to keep that in mind. Immunization is not the same thing as vaccination. If you look at the process of immunization, you'll see from the chart, immunity is pretty broad. And there's different ways that we can become immune. And there's the innate immunity that our body has. There's the adaptive, and you can get natural immunity. So natural immunity is things like it's passed down through your mother. Or natural immunity happens if you're exposed to chicken pox. So show of hands, how many people have had chicken pox? Okay, how many people have not had chicken pox? One person. So all of us who have chicken pox, we're still alive, right? They make it sound like it's such a horrible disease that we have to not get this disease. It's going to be catastrophic if children get this infectious disease. We grew up with chicken pox. Chicken pox has given us a natural immunity. So we don't have to worry about getting chicken pox again. And then there's the artificial immunity, which is where the vaccinations come in. And many of you that have heard me speak before know I'm not a big proponent of anything artificial. So whenever we talk about something artificial, my ears perk up and I kind of wonder what's going on here. Is it really good for us? You can look on YouTube on Dr. Bergman's channel and you can see tons of videos talking about the vaccinations and whether they're beneficial to you or not. And just a little hint, a little spoiler, they're not good for you. So I'm not going to talk about that aspect of it. We're just going to talk about the legal aspect of it. Okay, so medical procedures. A pinprick is considered a medical procedure. Well, what's an immunization? Most of them are pinpricks or injections. So that is a medical procedure. And there's different types. There's diagnostic medical procedures, EKGs, those type of procedures. There's surgical, there's anesthesia, and then there are therapeutic. And vaccines are considered therapeutic medical procedures. But keep in mind, they're medical procedures. So they're trying to push medical procedures on you and your children. So every day, this is the agenda that's out there. This is the agenda that if you look at the CDC website, if you look at different websites, with the World Health Organization, you will see this is a concerted effort. This is an agenda to push vaccinations on each and every one of you. They're not going to be happy until every child is vaccinated. They're not going to be happy until all of you adults are vaccinated with the flu vaccine. And so in order to spread the vaccinations around, they are increasing the people who can administer vaccines. So at first it was doctors and nurses, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, but they broadened that to allow pharmacists. So this is really scary. A pharmacist can inject a substance into your body. They don't know anything about your medical history. They don't know anything about allergic reactions you may have to medications. They know nothing about you. And they are allowed. You can just walk into, the Walgreens and you can say, I want a flu vaccine, and they're happy to give it to you. So this is really scary. The fact that they keep broadening this, and the stated reason is to make sure that more people can get vaccinated, is really scary. Now, the CDC has a program, and CDC is the Center for Disease Control, and it's the AFFIX program. And this program is designed specifically to increase the number of people that are vaccinated in each doctor's office. They don't want any missed opportunities. If a patient comes into a doctor's office, they want to make sure that that patient gets vaccinated. If that patient walks out without a vaccination, that's a missed opportunity. So what they do, they have this program, it's called the AFFIX program, where they get different doctor's offices to enroll in this program. And it's really exciting for the doctor's office. They come in and they do an assessment. That's the A part of the AFFIX. And they assess the coverage levels. So how many patients are coming into the office, and what's the percentage of the patients that are getting vaccinated? How many of these people are fully vaccinated? Then there's feedback. And the feedback is so that they can improve the coverage levels, making sure that people get their vaccines. And then there's incentives. And this is the part that is just horrible. They're giving these doctors incentives. So they're giving them free literature, and the literature, by the way, is all pro-vaccine. It's not like a product insert that will say the pros and cons and contraindications. It's all pro-vaccine. And it tells you, for example, why does my child need the flu vaccine? And they'll explain why your child needs the flu vaccine. They give the doctor's office the free literature, and then if the doctor's office performs well in this program, they'll reward the doctor. And the doctor can get rewarded in a whole host of different ways. The doctor can get rewarded with free literature. They can get rewarded with recognition, like maybe a plaque, maybe something out there on the internet. Well, if the CDC is promoting a doctor's office, people think, well, gosh, this must be a great doctor. Let me go to this doctor. So they get more recognition from other people. Now, everyone goes on the internet to find, information about their practitioner. That's just one more feather in their cap. The other way they get rewarded is they'll send the doctor or their staff to meetings where they can get continuing education, and those meetings are really expensive. And so to get that for free and to send your staff to that for free, that's a financial incentive. So it's in the doctor's best interest to make sure that he gets his coverage levels up higher. That's not in your best interest. That's the doctor's best interest. And then there's the exchange of information. Again, the whole goal is to improve the coverage levels of immunization. So what it says about one of the marketing materials is that the children need to have vaccines because they can begin to wear off, but they also tell them the different areas that they can go to increase their coverage levels. So what they can do is they could take advantage of, kids that come in just for health checks, sports or camp physicals. So they're providing doctors with information to help them to gear programs where they can get any kid that comes into the office, get them vaccinated. And this is all out there, CDC website. So parental consent. So parental consent is necessary for tattoos and body piercings. So it's illegal for somebody to body pierce a child, and a child is somebody under the age of 18. And it's also illegal for somebody to tattoo a child under the age of 18. So that sounds reasonable, right? It's a minor. Well, some vaccines do not require any parental consent. There is a statute that recently came down, 2012, where 12-year-olds can get the HPV vaccine. And they can get the vaccine without letting their parents know a thing. And that's really scary. And parents aren't entitled to know that their child got this vaccine. So we have Dr. Jacob Lalazari. He says, don't argue about the moral or ethics of this. Just look at the benefits. And then they argue also that if a 12-year-old is mature enough to say that they want to get this vaccine, well, that shows that they're mature enough to get the vaccine. It doesn't make any sense. It's crazy. What's happening is they tell the kids in school all the propaganda, all the scare tactics. You need to get the HPV vaccine because if you don't, you can get cervical cancer, and it's scary. So yeah, it makes sense. I'll sign up, They don't tell the child the other side. They just tell the child all the scare tactics, and the child then can make the decision without letting the parent know. So the vaccinated clinic does not need to let anybody know. The child can walk into some vaccinating clinic, and that clinic doesn't even have to tell the primary care physician. Now, it's encouraged. They should tell the primary care doctor, but they don't have to. There's no mandate. So this child can go to a clinic, get the HPV vaccine. Oh, and by the way, HPV, I think most of you know, it's for girls and boys. It used to be just for girls. Now they have it for boys as well. But they go down, they get their vaccine. Parents don't know. If the parents take the child to their primary care physician, and the primary care physician wants to vaccinate for HPV, that child can get double vaccinated. And this is like really, really scary. Or what if the child has an adverse reaction and doesn't tell the parents because they got the vaccine behind the parent's back? So this is really, really scary stuff here. And Governor Brown thought that this was a great idea. However, what they do is they're required to give the child one of these fact sheets. Have you guys seen these fact sheets? It's all sorts of fine print. It's ridiculous. Here's the fact sheet. It's two-sided. It's fine print. It tells you everything you need to know, how great the vaccine is, how it's going to protect you from cancer, how you need to get 3 doses. You can get it as early as 11 years old. Now they're starting actually at 9. And there is one little section that talks about people who shouldn't get vaccines, pregnant women who shouldn't get vaccines, but if you inadvertently get it, that's okay. And you can also breastfeed after you have the vaccine. But they don't really tell you about the risks. They minimize the risks so much, and they elevate the scare tactics so much that reading one of these sheets, it makes sense to a child that they should go get vaccinated. This is a 12-year-old child. They're very impressionable. So this is the kind of stuff that we need to be aware of and talk to our children about, because, like I said, the law is, as parents, we're not entitled to know. We can't even go get their medical records and find out this information. So our tax dollars are really, really hard at work for us. We pay a lot in taxes, and if you knew where your tax money went, you'd be outraged. I'm going to outrage you a little bit. So there's federal grants that are given for vaccines, and in 1985, it costs $45 for kids to get vaccines. The recommended vaccines from birth to age 18. Now, well, not now, in 2008, for males it was $1,100. I mean, that is insane. And for females it was $1,400. And so this is because a little bit of inflation, but the large portion of that is because of the vaccine schedules. There used to be very few vaccines that were required back in 85 compared to 2008. There's the Vaccines for Children program, and they were awarded $2.5 billion. That's with a B, billion. That's a whole heck of a lot of tax money. But that is for their program and for vaccine purchase. And the Affordable Care Act, what that does is that authorizes even more money so that we all can go rush out and get our vaccines and not have to pay for them. So, Health and Safety Code section 120325 talks about how they want total immunization for children for infectious diseases. And here's a list of all the infectious diseases, but my favorite one is number 11. Any other disease deemed appropriate by the department. So even though 10 childhood diseases is not enough to vaccinate from, we have a loophole where they can add whatever else is appropriate. And this is what is going on in our schools. This is childhood diseases. The schools are required to make sure that children are vaccinated for these diseases. And look, you've got the chickenpox vaccine on there. I'd rather have chickenpox than have this vaccine, and have the natural immunity than have this vaccine. It's not that big of a deal. So here's just, I want to show you just a little bit. I know you can't read it, but this is the vaccine schedule. And you have a vaccine schedule from people 4 months to 6 years, 7 years through 18 years. I mean, the list just keeps going on and on. This is just a partial list of the vaccine schedule. And they have it listed out what you need, you know, what the dose is. You can have multiple doses together. That's okay. Don't worry about it. You need to have them spaced out at certain time intervals. But this is what they're going off of, the doctors. They're going off of these vaccine schedules. And this one is a little hard to read as well. But what I want to point out here, in 2007, it was 36 vaccines. It's gone up since then. But in 1983, it was only 10. So that is a huge, huge jump. And we keep on getting more and more vaccines. So that list is growing longer. So what's really important is to make sure we protect those profits for the pharmaceutical companies. What had happened was there were some lawsuits, and they lost. The vaccine companies lost. And they threatened that, gosh, you know, we're getting hit with some big judgments here, and if we're going to be continuing to get hit with these big judgments, we're just going to go out of business, and we are not going to produce vaccines. And the government says, oh my, we can't have that happen. What we're going to do is we're going to do vaccine court. And vaccine court is actually something, it's a ridiculous name because it's administrative, it's not court. I don't know if you remember about, you know, the civics and the government, but there's the, you know, the judicial, which is the court, and they're supposed to be separate from the executive branch and from the legislative branch. And this is not court. They're not separate. This is administrative, which is part of the executive branch. And so what they decided is what we're going to do is we're going to fund the vaccine court from an excise tax of 75 cents per dose, and that's how we're going to cover the vaccine court. Now, what that means per dose is if you have like the MMR vaccine, that's 3 doses. So 75 cents times 3. You know, if it's just one, like the chickenpox vaccine, that's just 75 cents. And the pharmaceutical companies, the vaccine companies, don't pay a dime. This is a tax, and it's not something that's paid by the pharmaceutical company. So they're not even getting punished. Like, there's not even any incentive for them to really be responsible with what's going on with the product that they put out. And that, again, is really scary. So talk a little bit about the vaccine court. What they do is they have a table, and they say, here's the vaccine, here's illnesses, disabilities, or different conditions, and here's the time frame. So just take, for example, the MMR, anything with the rubella virus. It says chronic arthritis. It has to occur between 7 and 42 days. If it occurs within 7 to 42 days, then it's on the table. And you know what? You're okay. You can go forward with your claim. However, what happens if it's 6 months down the road? What happens if it's 45 days? Well, not on table. Doesn't matter. You know, it says here, any acute complication, including death, blah, 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 disability. Well, you know what? Not applicable. So if you have a disability, death, anything like that that occurs from that vaccine, not applicable. It's not on table. So thousands and thousands and thousands of people have made claims to the vaccine court and it's just been dismissed. Not on table. Doesn't matter. Sorry for you. So this is really an outrage. And who's paying for all this? Not the vaccine companies. You know, they're going along and they're making huge profits and they're happy as can be. Okay, so what can you do? Number one, be informed. What's going on? In California, we've got 3 types of exemptions. There's a medical exemption, a religious exemption, and a philosophical exemption. And we need to carefully word all these exemptions if you're going to be applying for one. Medical exemption is a little bit difficult unless you have something that's documented. It has to be documented, and also what happens with the medical exemption is sometimes they'll say, well, you know what, time's passed and things are okay now, so we're not going to continue on with that medical exemption. But there's a religious exemption and then there's a philosophical exemption. Now, Governor Brown, our lovely governor, in his infinite wisdom, proposed a new law, started this year in January, and you have a flyer, and it's a personal beliefs exemption form. So you're not entitled to just have a philosophical objection to vaccines. What you need to do is you have to go to the doctor and you have to tell the doctor that I have a philosophical objection to having this vaccine, to my children, administered to my children. The healthcare practitioner. So you look at the form, it's an MD or a DO, a nurse practitioner, a physician's assistant, a naturopathic doctor, which I'll talk about that in a second, or a credentialed school nurse. These are the only people that can fill out this exemption. And the thing is, if you fill out this exemption, that doctor many times is going to try and convince you, give you this literature about why you need the vaccine and try and convince you to go ahead and pressure you to get the vaccine, especially if they're part of the AFFIX program. So the religious exemption is something that still is valued and recognized. So you can check the religious exemption. Now, going back to the naturopathic doctor, what you need to be aware of is there's 5 naturopathic schools in the country, and California, you can't call yourself a naturopathic doctor unless you graduate from one of those 5 schools. Those 5 schools have all been infiltrated with the allopathic model, and they also, those doctors are able to write prescriptions, and they're also able to vaccinate you. They're able to administer vaccinations. So just because somebody says they're a naturopathic doctor doesn't mean they're coming from, that mindset, the holistic mindset. They may still be coming from the allopathic mindset. So check out who it is that you go to if you decide to go to a naturopathic doctor. So I know this one's also a little bit small, but the stated purpose of this bill that gave, rise to this form that has to be filled out is it's to boost the immunization rates. So all over the place, it doesn't matter if it's CDC, Governor Brown, the legislature, the goal is to boost the immunization rates. They want every single child vaccinated, fully vaccinated. Fully vaccinated means that whole vaccination schedule, they got each one. They got it on time. They also have schedules for, catching up if you fell behind. But they want every child fully vaccinated. So who's required to pay attention to this? Both public and private schools are required to do this. Child care centers, family daycare centers, nursery schools, all of these. And the law requires them to enforce these immunization practices. So these exemption forms are going to turn out to be very, very important. Now, there's other areas where vaccination comes into play in immigration. So if somebody immigrates here from another country or adopts a child from another country, they are required to be vaccinated. And if they're not, there has to be waivers. And the waivers have to be very carefully crafted. You don't want to submit a waiver and then have it be denied, and then you kind of lose your shot. So it's really important to get an attorney to help you with these waivers, to make sure that you're able to have this waiver on file and you're able to have it last, the duration of your life. And so two of the grounds is the religious beliefs and the moral convictions. When you're talking about immigration, the philosophical waivers are not recognized. And it's important when crafting, your exemption form for whatever purpose, that you're very clear on what you want to say and how you want to say it. For example, you don't want to claim a religious exemption and then talk all about how vaccines are bad, because there's no relationship between the two. If it's a religious exemption, you talk about your religious beliefs and how you hold them dearly. You don't really talk about the effects of the vaccine and your other philosophical beliefs on them. You don't want to mix those two, because they could deny, and they could say, well, you don't really have a religious objection. You have a philosophical objection, and we're not going to honor that. Okay, so employees in schools and colleges and healthcare curriculums. So these exemption forms will help in the classroom setting. So say, for example, you want to be a nurse. You can go to nursing school, you can get your waiver, and everything's great, but then you have to do clinical. And that's where you run into trouble, because it's the hospital's policy most of the time to say, no, we only want fully vaccinated students in our hospital. And the hospital is not really subject to the same criteria as the schools, because it's a hospital setting. So they're working actually on more legislation to make sure that in the hospital setting that healthcare workers and people have to have been fully vaccinated. Now, if you're already an employee of a hospital, you need to ask for the hospital's policy on waivers and get that, and then probably get an attorney to help you carefully craft a waiver so that you don't have to get your annual flu shots and whatever it is that you need. But if you're new on the block coming in, it's going to be really hard for them to permit you in, especially when there's so many students that want to come in and they want to get their nursing degree or whatever. A lot of times their hands are tied. So there are exceptions theoretically that are available, but on a practical level, whether they're going to be granted, it's highly doubtful. So the other area of concern is international travel. So international travel, it's governed by the World Health Organization, and there's different countries that are a part of this. And it's regulated by the International Health Regulation of 2005. Now, the thing to keep in mind about international travel is there's two countries. If you're American, so it'd be the U.S., and then whatever country it is that you're going to. And so our laws, of course, aren't going to be forced onto any other country. And that's where the IHR comes in. So the only vaccine that is required is the yellow fever vaccine. And this one, you know, you're stuck unless you have a medical exemption. But again, a medical exemption, you can't just go to a doctor and say, I don't want this, can you write an exemption for me? There has to be some documented medical reason for you to get the exemption. So the other thing to know is sometimes you might make it into this other country okay and everything's fine, but if you come back to the U.S., you may end up having to get vaccinated. If there's some type of outbreak somewhere, that may require vaccination. So international travel can kind of get a little bit tricky. And then they can also quarantine you. So if you're coming from, you know, some country and they have an outbreak of swine flu or avian flu or whatever, they might be able to quarantine you. So the good news is it's only one vaccine instead of a whole schedule of vaccines. The bad news is they can find other ways possibly to vaccinate for other conditions. So the other couple little concerns to think about is in family law matters. You know, if parents get divorced, one parent might say, I want my kid vaccinated. The other say, nope, I don't want my kid vaccinated. Then it becomes a battle. And the courts will honor certain exemptions, but you have to make a really good case for it. There is case law for it. It has happened, but the courts they don't want responsibility for, you know, the welfare of this child if the doctors are coming in and saying we recommend vaccination. So they usually defer to the doctor. And then in parental rights, there's some cases where children are taken from their parents for neglect or whatever. Then they're in the custody of the county. And if the county has custody of them, the county can go and get them vaccinated. So there is case law actually that some parents have fought that and won. I think that was in Arizona. I'm not familiar with a case here in California, but there is precedence for being able to still maintain the waiver. But you're fighting an uphill battle on that. So what I look at, well, first of all, I want to explain the FDA-funded depopulation agenda. So I don't know if anybody has heard about Bill Gates and his agenda on vaccinating everybody. He did a TED Talk, a 2010 TED Talk, where he was talking about how we need to have zero population growth because of what's happening in our environment and CO2, and just explained how we need to have zero population growth. What he said is one of the things that he said in the talk is that we can get there through vaccination policy. So he didn't elaborate, but I encourage you to go listen to that because I think the people in the know that vaccination is really detrimental to our health. But the other thing I like to liken this to is people become outraged, talking about, pro-choice. You know, it's my body. I have a right to what I want to do to my body. Keep your laws off my body. I mean, I just love, you know, all the posters that they've made, all the, you know, everything that they've put out. Freedom means choice. Well, why not for vaccination? You know, keep your laws off of our bodies. You know, if we want to go and vaccinate, then let us go and vaccinate our children. But don't impose laws on us that we are forced to get our children vaccinated. I mean, that to me is not freedom. That is not choice. But that is what is happening to us and to our society. And it's time that, you know, we take a stand and we start saying, no, keep your laws off of our body. You know, it's my body. I don't want to be vaccinated. It's my child's body. I don't want my child to be vaccinated. Why is it an uphill battle for us to not have our children vaccinated? It doesn't make any sense, and it's not freedom. So there's different things you can do to get involved. I don't know if anybody has heard of the Canary Party, but you can look up the Canary Party, and they're you know, pro-choice in this way. You know, let us have a choice in vaccination. So what I encourage you to do, if you have any need for legal services with regard to vaccination or any other, you know, legal advice relating to alternative or natural health care, give me a call. You have a flyer here, and I think, Lori, do you have any coupons? Lori has some coupons for me, because I also do, I'm also a practitioner myself.